This was fake accounts, hidden identities, and people who do that often do worse stuff because they think they can get away with it.
City Councillor Sarah Tambleton says it's time to stand up to online bullies. Having been the victim of a targeted trolling campaign, she wants takedown notices and complaint procedures streamlined.
It's in workplaces, it's across politics, it's everywhere. And sometimes people, I think, just think they're having fun. They don't see a person at the other end of it. Some of the worst of it is deliberately targeted at silencing underrepresented voices. It tends to be women, gender minorities, ethnic groups who get the worst of the online harassment. It just takes its toll when it keeps going, and you don't know when it's going to stop. And you constantly wonder whether next time you open up Facebook, there's going to be something else there. And the way the system's set up, if you block someone completely and you turn off your tagging, it doesn't stop them. And they can still be out there doing stuff, and you don't know who's seeing it. You don't know what other people will think of you. Clearly, I'm never going to change these guys' minds about what they think about me. But it's that impact on other people in my relationships with other people that was at risk. I've been contacted by people whose lawyers have asked them to contact me to get advice for how to feel informed. Because I was successful, right? And they were like, well, how did she do it? What things do you need to add into your affidavit? What things are useful to be saying when you're trying to persuade the court that there's been harm? And actually that was one of the biggest things, was admitting the harm. And that's tough. So you have to, because it's the Harmful Digital Communications Act, there is no breach of the Act unless you have been hurt. And you have to prove that you've been hurt to have action. And that's really tough. So I had to admit the harm to NetSafe, and then I had to admit the harm to the court by way of an affidavit and those kind of things. We're incentivised not to. You don't want to admit the harm because you don't want the people who've been harassing you to get satisfaction to know that they've hurt you. And admitting that means that they'll get some pleasure from that. You don't want to be told that you shouldn't be in the job you've got because you don't have a thick enough skin. The harassment, it just goes with the job. You're a public figure, of course you should expect criticism. What I had wasn't criticism, it was harassment. And I'm all in for constructive criticism on the ideas and debate, all of that kind of stuff. But personal attacks like that do not go with the job. But that people will say that if you go public and if you admit that it hurt and you didn't like it. Yeah, it does need beefing up. And, I haven't looked into the hate speech stuff specifically because it's not the stuff that I've experienced, but the harmful and hurtful speech stuff that I have, there's very little by way of disincentive apart from some public shaming, if you like, in my circumstance, or Nadia Lim's, for example. But for normal everyday people who, if they uncover who it is that's been harassing them, and sometimes they already know, they just can't prove it, there's no disincentive because there's no public shaming and there's no fines. And I don't know how often the system's actually been used to fine people. You might get ordered by the court to take down some content or to stop doing it, but that's about as far as it goes. And, we take seriously when someone physically harms someone else, but we don't seem to take it as seriously when someone causes you mental health issues and mental distress. For Facebook even to take something down, it needs to be a specific threat to a specific person. I am going to do something to you, not someone should do something to them. That kind of comment doesn't even breach Facebook's rules and doesn't get taken down. And when you get a pile of those one after another, they build up over time, and it's only a matter of time before those kind of things lead to people seeing it as normal that you would act on that.
And this is a concern, normalising.
Yeah, absolutely. When we allow these things to stay on the internet and we allow them to become a normal part of everyday discourse, then that becomes our baseline. And it's a harmful baseline to start with, but it means that once that's normalised, you go, oh, so the next stage up, people start doing, and because this baseline is here now, the next yeah, it's not that much worse, and then we allow that to happen, and then that gets normalised until any clamping down on it seems draconian. You need to start when you know it's an issue, even if it's hard to define. Something needs to happen.
So, whose responsibility is this? Of course, there's the gnarly question of the companies like Facebook or Google, whoever own the systems, being in charge of patrolling.
And they make a lot of money from it. This stuff gets a lot of clicks, and that's where they make their money. They're not really incentivized to lower the heat in a conversation, whatever the conversation is. So social media companies absolutely need to play a stronger role in that. A central government needs to be much clearer with the rules and regulations. It needs to have more advocacy. It needs to make the processes easier and for anyone to go through. But it's up to all of us to call it out when we see it. The problem is, of course, that sometimes when we do call out the harm that we see and the harmful comments, we get accused of cancel culture. And that's a term I absolutely hate, and it's used by people who, ironically don't want to hear the opinions that other people have on their opinions, if you like. And it's a way of silencing people who are calling out harm and injustice by telling them that they're cancelling someone else's opinion, when actually it was it's complicated.
Well, there are many opinions and there are many expressions of the opinion. It's the expression that matters here. So I can disagree with you quite angrily, but with respect.
Yep. And, those strong debates and really heartfelt debates over ideas are completely valid. Yes. But when they come into being personal attacks, that's quite different.
So where do we sit with what is described by some as the chilling of free speech once we stop people saying freely what they wish to say?
I think that concept completely ignores the fact that so many voices have been silenced for a really long time and haven't had that freedom and their voice heard. And so that's, women, gender minorities, ethnic minorities within the country and across the world who have had their voices silenced and their voices not heard, have not had that freedom of speech for a really long time. And now that they are claiming it and saying, I want to be heard, those who have had control are calling it cancel culture.